Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest today is Denny Tedesco, who's the director of The Wrecking Crew, a movie about one of the greatest studio bands ever. But first of all, let's talk about the Allocation for Music Producer Act, which is shortened to AMP. This was a new bill introduced in the House of Representatives that basically will give producers and engineers royalties from non-interactive streaming services like Pandora, cable television, and SiriusXM. Up until now, producers, of course, would get royalties, but it would be very difficult for them to collect on the digital streams because they're getting royalties primarily on sales, and of course a digital stream isn't a sale specifically, so it was very difficult for them to collect. And engineers, except for the very, very elite, would never receive royalties. And you might find some of the bigger mixers that in fact would be able to get maybe 1 point on a mix. Really, you have to be very, very hot in order to be able to get something like this. But now the AMP Act will actually enable producers and engineers to at least get a little bit of the pie. Now, the way it works now is the royalties from radio-like streaming, non-interactive streaming, is split 3 different ways and is collected by Sound Exchange. So basically what happens is 50% goes to the copyright holder, 45% goes to the artist, and 5% goes to featured players. So, for instance, if you have a soloist or a guest artist that would come in, you could allocate 5% to that featured player or players. But now what's going to happen is 2% is going to go to the producers and engineers, and this is going to come out of the artist's 45%. So now we'll have this split 4 ways. Basically 50% to the copyright holder, 43% to the artist, 5% to feature players, and 2% to the engineer and the producer. It's not that much, but you know what? It's more than what they were making before, which was nothing. So this is a start. It's in the right direction. It still hasn't passed, but it's really nice that someone is thinking about producers and engineers and that everyone will finally at least get a little piece of the pie. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to questions@bobbyowinnercircle.com. Don't forget about my new coaching program, which is 101 Mixing Tricks, big studio tricks for the small studio. You can go to 101mixingtricks.com to learn more. The next thing I want to talk about is a couple of technologies that will really actually help our workflow, I think. Everyone is used to touchscreens now with the iPad and Surface and basically tablets that are based around touchscreen, and we see consoles or control surfaces coming along like the Raven from Slate Digital, and it appears that that's the future, but there's actually technology that goes one beyond that. It's something that's being worked on by Google Advanced Technologies and Products Group, or ATAP, and it's something they called Project Soli. That's S-O-L-I, Project Soli. What it does is use radar and creates a virtual controller. So in midair, you could turn a controller, turn a pot, move a virtual slider. And if you combine that with a holographic image, what you'll suddenly find is that you can manipulate just about any control without having to have a physical controller or without having to have a touchscreen. The beauty of this is the fact that it's all been compressed down to a single microchip, and it doesn't need anything else beyond that. So it's very, very reliable, and it looks like it'll be very cheap, and will make electronic devices even cheaper in the future, because one of the most expensive parts in an electronic device are the controls. So the pots, for instance, the potentiometers are one of the most expensive things. Sliders, for instance, faders are very expensive in comparison to everything else electronically that you have inside some sort of electronic device. By getting rid of these things and putting them in the virtual domain, what we'll find is all this will be able to get cheaper. Not only that, it looks like the precision of what you can do is pretty fantastic as well. So we can be very, very precise, which is something that you can't always get with the touch surface. So this is pretty exciting. There's also something else I want to tell you about that's also an exciting advance, and that's Thunderbolt 3. So right now, most Apple devices, new Apple devices, are on Thunderbolt 2. The big thing about Thunderbolt 2 is it's twice as fast as the original Thunderbolt. Well, here we go with Thunderbolt 3, which again is twice as fast as what we currently have. So basically, what we're getting is a 40 gigabytes per second bandwidth, which is incredibly fast. And what that gives us is more speed, more power, because we can actually power devices over this, and will give us more pixels so we can have many, many more screens going at the same time, and also higher resolution screens. We can have 4K screens all over the place. But what's the most impressive thing and exciting thing about Thunderbolt 3 is that it will use a standard USB connector. The beauty of this is that it will always be backwards compatible. So if you have a USB device, you can use it no problem. And if you have a Thunderbolt device, you can use it with that USB connector. USB connectors are also relatively cheap. And with the USB-C, the very, very smallest one, they're very tiny, so you can find those on just about any kind of electronic device. So this is exciting because what will happen is suddenly we'll have very, very fast intercommunication between devices, and we'll be able to connect a lot of different devices as well to just about anything electronic pretty soon, and that will be cool. And also, it'll be a lot less expensive than what we're paying now. As you well know, if you try to go and buy something that's Thunderbolt, it's really expensive. Just the cables are $30 a piece, which, is kind of a drag. So look for this in the near future because this is all nearly reality. It's Thunderbolt 3, and before that, it's going to be virtual devices via radar. My guest today is Denny Tedesco, and he's the director of a great movie. It's called The Wrecking Crew. And The Wrecking Crew is one of the greatest studio bands ever, playing on virtually every hit, every movie, every TV show made in Los Angeles during the 60s and 70s, and if you listen to just about any song by the Mamas and Papas, the Grassroots, the Righteous Brothers, and you can go on, that's the Wrecking Crew backing them up. Tommy Tedesco, Denny's father, was the most recorded guitar player in history and the de facto ringleader of the Wrecking Crew. And Denny made it his life's work to actually document the exploits of this fantastic band. So the movie is called The Wrecking Crew. Denny's the director, and I was really pleased to speak to him via Skype. Denny, thank you for being with me today. I enjoyed the Wrecking Crew film so much I can't tell you.
Thank you for being there.
What I want to know is, how did all this get started? Because it's an enormous project that you took on, or at least it ended up that way. How did it get started?
Yeah, I didn't, it's funny because there's no way no one in their right mind would have ever done something like this if someone said it's going to take you 19 years to get this thing out. I mean, that's just crazy. I started it in 96 when my father, Tommy Tedesco, guitar player, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I knew I wanted to tell his story. And they gave him a year to live. And I was thinking, if I don't jump on this now, I'll never be able to tell this story. And I've always wanted to tell it. And I just started filming, put a round table together, put him, Carol Kay, bass player, and Plaz Johnson and Hal Blaine together at this round table at a studio called Evergreen at the time. And that was the first day of shooting. And shooting film at the time as well. So I had 2 cameras on dollies. And I kind of based it on Broadway Danny Rose, one of my favorite films with Woody Allen, where they sit around talking about Danny Rose. And that's how musicians are. They talk a lot. If they're not with their instruments, they're very funny people, and they love to outdo each other sometimes when they're talking about each other. And that's what I was hoping to get, and that's what I got out of that round table.
Was the round table just the impetus to the whole film, or was it something, were you hoping that the round table would be the film?
No, I always knew there'd be more than the round table. I just didn't. I just knew I had to get my father down on tape or on film, and I knew I wanted. I wanted to do more roundtables, but to be a voyeur in the whole situation, not interview people as much as possible. But I had big dreams about what the look was going to be, and we went for it. But after a while, what happens is, the look is not as important as the message, and I learned that by having to, when I was determined to shoot film, for a perfect example, I wasted a lot of time, with film, because I could have shot my father just with a cassette recorder. I could have had him on cassette and got some great stuff interviewing him. But, I would say quotation mark, I wanted to be the director. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted to be that guy with a look. And, in the end, listen, I'm happy the way it came out. I just wish, it's what it is. I'm very happy. It's about the message.
Well, and for everybody, and I have a little bit of a background in television, so I know that it's really easy to go down that path where you go, I only want this quality, and then all of a sudden, there are so many formats, and all of them are pretty good
God.
and better than what we had before. So, it really, it confused things for a while, so I can understand that.
Yeah, and it's very confusing because, those days it was like, hey, do you shoot it with, are we going to shoot 16 millimeter? Yes. Are we going to shoot widescreen? Are we going to shoot double perf? Are we going to shoot 4x3? Are we going to shoot this? I was like, oh my God, I didn't know what we were doing. I was a filmmaker in a sense, but I didn't know where this, at the time, documentaries, were the kiss of death anyways. And then you put music in front of a documentary, that was even worse. No one wanted to talk to you about music docs. And that was one of the reasons why it took us 19 years, because, once Dad passed away in, 97, I started shopping this 14-minute VHS around, shopping, trying to get someone interested in helping us. And they kept saying, well, this is great, but you're never going to get this made because it's almost impossible. You're never going to get the labels and the publishers to agree upon this. And if you did, they're going to be so out of price. They're going to be so pricey that your market's not going to be. It's not going to be realistic because a music doc is only going to make this much, but to make this film with all this music is going to cost this much. So no one ever thought in the right. No one's going to touch it. And so we kept going and going, and I kept interviewing people. Along the 10 years, I interviewed Brian Wilson, I go Lou Adler, Herb Alpert, Nancy Sinatra, Cher, and I kept interviewing all these people, Mickey Dolenz, as we went along. And then around 2006, 10 years after we had started this project, my wife, Susie, was concerned we just blew all this money and we just made the most expensive home movie. We had nothing to show. We had nothing cut. We had nothing other than this 14-minute piece. So the only way to prove that we had something is to cut a film. So I basically had to hire a producer editor finally, and I got Claire Scanlon on, who's now actually a director on Blackish and Brooklyn Nine-Nine and a bunch of other shows. She came on, and we kind of, over a year and a half put this thing together. And that's when 2008 came along, we got into film festivals. But we still had that situation called the music. And you can't tell this movie without the music. And the music was going to probably cost $750,000 at that point. Wow. And they weren't holding me up. Believe me, the record labels, the publishers, they were not holding us up at all. It was just, so much of it. And I had the musicians union. I still had them to deal with so that the musicians could get paid. I still had stock footage. I still had, 5-1 mix to do. I had a lot of things to do still.
Wow. What a job it turned out to be. Jeez. And so how did you end up financing it?
Well, the people that came through, I like to joke, is MasterCard, Visa, Countrywide. All these people were very kind until 2008 came around. Borrowed money from Mom, Basically, we ran everything dry. And then once we got into the festivals, we thought, all right, well, someone's going to pick us up. We did extremely well. We had huge reviews and quotes from Elvis Costello to Peter Frampton, loving it. But until we could pay this off, we could never release it. So in 2010, it was, after 2 years, now I have all these great quotes and reviews. No one wants to touch us. I realized that was I think the lowest point for us. And then I was looking for, trying to get one of the, like a Fender company or a Zildjian or Ludwig or any of these companies to help out with money. Zildjian came through. They came through with some, with cymbals, which was great. But, some of these other companies who could afford $10,000, $20,000, they, won't even take your call.
Wow.
And I was hoping that they would jump in and help out, but they didn't. But what came out of that, which is more important, was a guy said to me, Greg Owsinski, who was a radio guy, he said, listen, he says, why don't you do donations? Like, take, for example, he said, do a dedication chapter on the songs. I said, what are you talking about? He says, you know how we go to hospitals, you always see a family name on it, like on a brick? Do that with the songs. He said, I'll give you $1,000 right now for Up, Up, and Away. Now, this guy was in radio technology, and the reason he wanted to do this is that song, which is a Wrecking Crew song, was the song that changed his life. Because when he was 12 or 13, he remembers being on a transistor radio, going between station to station and seeing the difference between the same song on two different stations. He said that was the song. So he was the first one. He said, go through a 501c, which I did, went through the International Documentary Association. And so donations started coming in. I figured, all right, we have to pay, whatever it is, $500,000. I don't even know at this point. We just know we have to pay this stuff off. So donations started coming in, $5, $10, $1,000, $100. And that's how I did it. Sometimes it was dedications. Sometimes it's just people want to donate $25 to be a groupie or a roadie or whatever it was we had. And I would go around the country having these fundraising screenings where I would go into, a screening and I'd say, hey, you know what, guys, sign this piece of paper, put your email on it, and you might win something special tonight. Well, what I did was collected all these names, give them something special. They saw the film. And when I needed to really go for it, years later, with Kickstarter, I had a mailing list of 20,000 people. We had a wonderful group of Facebook fans of 23,000. So that's how we did it. And we just kept going and just never given up.
What was the final budget, if you don't mind me asking?
No, it's no problem. To be honest with you, I don't really know. Honest to God, I'm not trying to be coy about it. It's got to be close to I got to think it's got to be over $1 million now, only for the reason I know how much in debt I am after 19 years. But after a while, I just couldn't keep going. So that's why, because over 19 years, you realize, oh, all right, we got to make dubs. Oh, we got to do this. Oh, we got to do that. Right now I'm in the office still, people still helping me trying to get these outtakes out, it's got to be under $1 million, but you know what? It's not just music. It's not, it just keeps adding up.
But even so, that's really a small amount of money for a movie like this.
Yeah, no, you think it is, but you know what? It's interesting you said that, because in 2009, there was an article in Variety, and they were talking about music docs struggling, to find homes. And they were talking about directors like Martin Scorsese with his Stones film struggling, and Demi with his Neil Young film. And then you're talking about this other director named Denny Tedesco with his Wrecking Crew film. I went, oh my God, I'm on a list of the same page of these struggling directors. Oh my.
Yeah.
I was thrilled to be called a director, let alone be on the same page as Scorsese.
There's good and bad in that, yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like whatever. I was just hoping Marty was going to call,
Yeah,
but Marty still hasn't called. If you're listening, Marty, please call.
Well, I mean, the good thing is to be lumped in with those guys. The bad thing is to be lumped in with a failing genre.
Yeah, exactly. And and the best thing has happened over the years. Listen, Standing in the Shadows came out, and I was already 6 years into my project. It did extremely well. And Lionsgate released it. But, when you talk to Lionsgate, well, they say, oh, that's years ago. Well, my audience didn't die.
Yeah.
It was just no one wanted to hassle my project. No one wanted the hassle of it. It was a big ordeal to try to get licensing from everybody. And again, it was just took time. You just don't do this overnight when you're trying to make deals. You could get 20 Feet to Stardom. That helped us. Those were great films that were very successful. Muscle Shoals was very successful. If those films were not successful, maybe we wouldn't be here with Magnolia.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have been doing it on my own. And I would have done it on my own. That's the thing, is I was determined if Magnolia Pictures didn't come on, I'm going to do it on my own. And I could. Not as well, but I was not going to let this, that was the thing is, and I said recently, we were in a weird situation. We crossed a couple lines in the making of this thing. In the 2006, well, what do we cross that line? If we don't keep going and try to finish it, we just wasted 10 years and maybe $150,000 over those 10 years. Then you got to 2010. We already did 2008 where we were in the festivals. Now do we stop here, have the awards, and we've only wasted maybe $300,000 of our last 12 years of our lives.
Yeah. Wow.
Or do we go forward? And we had to go forward because if the film had been, in the festivals and it got bad reviews, it'd be fine. I mean, not fine. It would be horrible. But it was just the opposite. What am I going to do? Just stop now? So the only way to, possibly ever get this film out and maybe one day recover our investment is just to keep going.
Was it difficult to get people to talk? In other words, no. The people in the film, was it difficult to get them?
Yes and no. I mean, sometimes it was like the studio musicians. No, that was fine. It was easy. Certain artists, Jimmy Webb, I got a hold of him through someone, and he responded. Same thing with Gary Lewis. Nancy, I got through, I think Don Randy, and Cher came through an agent. Now, I know when I asked the agent for Cher, I knew the agent, but I think she was asking out of respect for me. I didn't think she actually felt like Cher would ever say yes to it. And when she came back to me and said, Cher said yes, I could hear it in her voice as how excited she was for me.
Yeah.
And I knew I had a chance with Cher because I had worked with Cher on a video in the 80s when she was, doing one of her rock and roll videos. And I remember standing next to Sharon, and, I was a grip at the time, and I introduced myself. And I said, my dad worked with you, Cher. She goes, who's your dad? Not thinking, she's going to hear Tommy Tedesco. And I said, Tommy Tedesco. And she goes, oh, my God, Tommy and Hal Blaine. And she started rattling off the names. I realized she was 16, 17 when she's working with these guys. That's a good time in their lives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're talking about some good stuff. So I knew I had a chance if I could get to her. It's always the case, as everybody knows, if you can get past the gatekeeper, we might have a chance.
Yeah, right. Right, definitely. Well, when you were growing up, did you ever get to hang out with any of the stars that your dad played with?
No. Dad went to work. It's funny because Dad went, and I asked my mom recently, I said, Mom, did you ever go to those Peggy Lee dates when he was doing the club thing and all that? She goes, no. So Dad always said, a plumber never takes his wife to work. And, it is, as you know, it's work. No matter what you do, you're at work.
Yeah.
And that was the focus. Dad was focused. And the only job she got to go with that was really special was Strangers in the Night with Sinatra. And that was because it was a lie. If they wanted an audience, they invited some of the guests, some of the wives down. So my mom got to go. And then after halfway through the session, Frank leaves, and then Dean Martin comes in for the second half. Wow. So it's pretty cool. But, I knew Dad went to work, but Dad went to work like any other dad. The only difference is, I always say in his trunk of his car, he had a banjo, classical guitar, Telecaster, 12-string, mandolin, and amp, and that was it. He didn't have, a saw or a hammer.
Yeah.
But he went to work. He didn't know where he was going, maybe, possibly, or who he was recording with. And when he went to work so many times a week, there's no way he could have, kept up with all who he was working with and knowing, certain things, but
yeah, he
never came home with it. We never hung out with musicians' kids, dad, dad was dad, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. Did he talk much towards the end of his life? Did he talk much about those times when you're interviewing him? Did he remember much?
Yeah, well, it's somewhat. You just want to kick yourself. You know what I mean? You go, God, I wish I would have asked him this. God, I wish I would have asked him that. And I tell people now, I said, I don't, even if you're not making a documentary about anybody, ask your parents, put it down on tape. Your grandparents. It's so easy now with just your iPhone. Just ask them some questions. You'll be amazed what you'll get if you ask. But he did, when he was in high school, he started doing his own stuff, his own jazz stuff. And I started becoming interested in him in his career and stuff. And he was doing movies. He was heavy in the movies at that point. So I knew what was going on. So, because I wanted to be in movies. I was, trying to work in film. So, he's working with John Williams and James Horner and all these things. And, some days were really, he would talk about it, say, yeah, it was a good, it was a good piece today. It was all, me and strings today. Sometimes it was nothing.
Yeah.
But he was also writing those articles for Guitar Player magazine at the time,
I
70s
remember.
and 80s. And those became very, very popular. But also, I think it also helped him key on situations to remember a lot of things, because he would take the music and write an article about it. So he was more conscious of what he was doing, of his work at that point. I wish he would have done that in the 60s. It would have been pretty cool to know what he was doing then.
Yeah, yeah. I met your dad when he was playing a gig with I guess it was his trio.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at a party for Fender, and it was when Bill Schultz took over Fender.
Right.
So they did the buyout.
Fender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a little party at NAMM. A
Yeah.
very small group of people, but your dad and his band was playing there, and I met him briefly. And, the other thing that was interesting that I really loved in the movie, there are those clips from when he spoke at Musicians Institute.
Yeah, right.
And I was there.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
So it was.
What class were you?
What's that?
What class were you?
No, I wasn't in the class. Someone had invited me down.
Oh, wow.
And I was just a innocent bystander watching all this, and actually I didn't even know who I was going to see. It was just, hey, come on down and see this. It might have been, well, whatever it was. I remember being there, and I specifically remember some of those stories. Your dad was a great storyteller. It was terrific.
Yeah, and that's what he loved. It's funny because he couldn't teach. He was not one of those guys. Here's what you do in this chord and this da da da. He wasn't that kind of a guy, a teacher. But he was a great teacher for keeping people's careers intact and helping them along and explaining things. He was really practical in terms of what he knew and how to get there. That's documentary footage came from an earlier doc that never went anywhere. When my buddy John Leonidakis in Loyola Marymount, we did this project for school, and what really came out of it, other than was that footage, and we also had the Zappa footage that you saw.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
And the Zappa footage was interesting because I went to Frank to show him the piece of the Gong Show that my dad was messing around with. He did that stint on the Gong Show as a joke. And I wanted Frank to say something about it and give it to him and let him quote about it. And I expected Frank to say something funny. Well, Frank's not funny. Frank's a very serious dude. I didn't realize that. I underestimated Frank Zappa. I didn't know who he was, I guess.
I worked with him for a while, so yes, I know.
You know what I mean? He's a cool guy, but he knows what he. So when I showed it to him and he gave me his comments, I went, oh, that wasn't that good. It was kind of almost disappointing, and then I realized when I was cutting this film and I was coming towards the end of the film, I went, oh my God, Frank Zappa gave me this piece 30 years ago. We could slot it in now.
Yeah.
It was about the end of a career.
Yeah.
And it worked out perfect. There were certain things that just, you know what? You can't force it sometimes, even though you want to. And that was the perfect situation where I've slotted that in. And that, originally when we started cutting this film, the film was never going to be about my father and these guys. It was going to be about all the guys and Carol. It was going to be a group of them and about that story. And we cut 30 minutes in around 2007. And a buddy of mine, Grady Cooper, said, why are you cutting it like this? I said, what do you mean? He says, you have an opportunity to cut this differently, because any one of us can cut what you just cut in this building. He said, we're all editors. You just gave us a History Channel doc. And what he was saying is, you're not going where you should go, which is a personal touch to this. And I said, well, and it's funny because I say this truthfully, it was my ego that stopped me from doing that. My ego, when I say my ego, was I didn't want to be recognized as Tommy's kid directing this.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't help me to get the next job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I was given this job, but I realized to tell the story and tell it well, I did need to do it that way. After I played around with it and they convinced me and I played around with it, I was okay with it. So that's when I said, okay, it's the story. And then we started with, this is the story of my father, Tommy Tedesco, and his extended family, the Wrecking Crew. And then we started cutting it that way. What that did is allowed me to go in and out of that footage. When I needed something lighter in a moment, I could go to my father. I knew my father's career inside and out. I knew his practicality. I knew his common sense, and I knew what made him tick. So knowing that seminar footage, I knew what was important to him.
Yeah.
And I knew what it was important to tell the story. So that helped it.
Well, speaking of which, so in cutting this, I'm sure you've become quite the historian on the Wrecking Crew.
Well, somewhat. I mean, yeah.
Well, you know more about what went on there than most people. Let's put it like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny because there's that book out now that Ken Sharp did, and he took some of my interviews, and most of them are his. It's funny
I read
because
it, yeah.
It's a beautiful book,
yeah.
Gorgeous book, and Mark London designed it. What's interesting is sometimes their memories go,
Yeah.
And you go, well, I don't know if it really happened that way because so-and-so says, but you could have two people telling the same story who were there, and it could be opposites of what really happened.
Well, it's funny. I did a book with Ken Scott, who is one of the 5 Beatle engineers and producer for David Bowie, and
right.
On and on. And when he was trying to think back to when he was doing the Beatles, which again we're talking the '60s, and there was so much that he could remember and so much that he was foggy on. So he would say, well, go see this person, this person, this person, this person. And I'd go, and only by talking to a lot of people could I actually put the story together, because everybody had a piece of it. And there are many times when there were contrary pieces, but after a while you can sort of sift through it, or at least hope you're sifting through it to get the total picture. But it's amazing what people remember and what they don't.
How Hal Blaine says something towards the end of the film. He says, listen, we were at the right place at the right time, meaning their careers.
Yeah.
You know what? I was at the right place in the right time telling the story, because when my dad passed away, he was 67. Hal's 68 at that time. The other, Don Randy, 61 at the time. So their memories, listen, our memories are pretty good in our 60s, early 60s. We're still there, hopefully. I'm hoping I will be.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? So if I had to tell that story now, forget it. It would be impossible to tell the story well. It would be impossible. Memories are foggy. People have passed on. I think the worst interview, when I say worst, was when I got to be able to, interview Al DeLore. I interviewed Glenn Campbell, and I interviewed him in the early years. When I say early years, 2002, 2003, and he was amazing. Now, there was something going on in the interview. I didn't realize until many years later that we had an issue with Alzheimer's, but when I got to Al DeLore, who I was dying to interview, he moved back to the West Coast from Nashville, and I got to him, he had dementia. And that was worse than trying to go, or someone passing some ways, because I felt like I wasted time, meaning like I should have gone and got Al DeLore. I should have gone to Nashville, but I couldn't. I couldn't get these guys.
Yeah.
I couldn't travel. The only time I traveled was when I went to Phoenix. I could get to Glenn Campbell and Snuff Garrett and Al Casey. But when I got to Al DeLore, that was hard. That was really hard to get someone with dementia. Just feeling like, because he had, it was sad.
What did you learn from doing the film about the Wrecking Crew that you didn't know?
You know what? It's funny because over the 19 years, you start wondering did you know this before, or do you think it's embedded in my head now? You know what I mean? I can't, even my memory's gone. I was always blown away, like when someone, they did that too, or they did that, Kenny Rogers in the, first edition, things like that. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Grassroots, I didn't realize.
Me either. Yeah.
But it was when you look at these date books and you realize how quick they were moving. Last night I was showing that book to Dave Pell, who was with us, who ran Liberty, was an arranger and producer of, Liberty and a few others. And that one page that had an example of my dad's book within the book, his workbook, it was March 1961, and it was only a couple weeks after I was born. And I looked at it, and he worked with Dave Pell 3 times that week. And it was really cool to have the guy that he worked with. And that was just coincidence. You know what I mean? Hey, check this out, Dave. And I opened this up, and there he is, Dave Pell. And one of the sessions was at 2:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And now, what the hell that was, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. They pretty much got along. They all got along. There wasn't enough time to really, hate each other. It wasn't like a band on the road. They would go do 3 hours session, move on to another session. Same guys could be there, maybe not.
What amazes you about I know that there's so much that you know about them, and it is an amazing fact that they played on so many songs, and so many songs that are embedded in our consciousness.
Yeah.
But is there something in particular that kind of blew you away about that?
I think because there's certain things, listen, we've all interviewed so many people. I've been in the film business doing this for 30 years. I've been around many big egos, huge egos, directors, actors, and musicians. But these musicians have less ego than others, than anybody else I can, ever think about. I've done many of rock videos in the 80s and 90s, with huge artists. But you know what? These guys had no egos. I mean, they had enough ego to get them through the door, but they always left their ego at the door. And that is, to me, the greatest thing about these musicians. And I think I realized that was something that was unique to them. That's part of their job. Somebody had a Q&A a few weeks ago said something to me, or asked the question, should they have had a, what was it? IP, blah, blah, blah. It was like an intellectual property agreement or something like that. I don't know. I'm not law.
Yeah.
And I went, as if that's going to, why, and she was saying is like, she felt like they were taken advantage of. They were so not taking advantage of this group. This wasn't the Motown guys who, they got screwed out of a lot of payments sometimes, the guys at Motown. These guys didn't. They did great. They had a great living. My dad, when they would ask, should you have gotten paid more because you did this solo at the beginning or you made something up or help with the arrangement? He said, no. He said, listen, he says, I made hundreds of hits, but I made thousands of bombs. I never gave anybody their $25 back, and that's the way it was. And that's how our jobs are. You don't hold back creativity. Can you imagine holding back creativity?
No.
He said, I just play. He said, listen, I go there. The guy has a piece of music there, or maybe doesn't, whatever it is. I play until the guy smiles. If he's smiling, I'm good. If he's not smiling, let's change it up. Let's keep going, because if we're in trouble if he's not smiling.
Yeah. One of the things I liked best about the movie was really how comfortable everybody was, and especially like Cher, for instance, Herb Alpert, Leon Russell. It's like they really wanted to tell the story. They were really into it.
You know what? It's funny. There's different levels that you're bringing up right there. Leon didn't come until a year ago. Leon did not want to be part of this and part of this film. And I think, and part of his reasoning, I can't really go into Leon's head, but I think someone, Leon was saying, it was a bunch of bull. He said, we weren't called the Wrecking Crew. In a lot of ways, he's right. A lot of people don't remember it ever being called Wrecking Crew. But it was one of his guitar player, Pat Flynn, was the one that really pushed him into saying, hey, you should really be part of this. This is your legacy. And he finally said, yeah. So when I went out to Nashville, I was thinking, oh, God, I'm flying out to Nashville. Again, guys, I'm on my own. I'm just like, I'm hoping to God he says yes when I get there. Or he said yes. I hope he still says yes. And I don't know if his interview is going to be any good. But you know what? It was great. It was awesome. And he was honest. And all these guys are honest at this point in their lives. There's no one not telling the truth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really believe that, they might have different takes on a story, but they all pretty much don't hold back, and there's no reason to. They're out of, it's not like we have another job that we're trying to hold on to for next week. So it's not like they're trying to hold up their careers are fine at this point.
But a lot of it has to do, like you said, with their legacy. They're proud of what they've done, and to some degree, they've never gotten the credit they deserve. I mean, on some low level, but not like it's they're not the household word that they should be. No. And
it's funny. And, I'm glad they are, the fact that, listen, when we, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, it might've been, it was, we knew we made it when we actually found out that we were a category on Jeopardy. Went, oh my God,
really?
We have pushed this to this point,
Yeah.
Now Hal's book came out in whatever it was, 90. And I started doing the film in 96, and we just kept pushing this thing down everybody's throat. I think, and then, Ken Hartman last year or 2 years ago came out with his book on the Wrecking Crew. And now, the Sound Explosion, with all the interviews that Ken Sharp did, it will be household names. Listen, the geeks, when I call ourselves the geeks, we all know who did what.
Yeah.
But then there's always the other folks that, the mom and pop or whoever who have no interest go, I didn't know what we're going to see. And I'm thrilled we went to go see that movie.
Well, there's more to it than that, Danny. In the books I write, and I've written 24 or 25 now, I do it for a reason. At least one of the reasons is I try to be a historian. So right. I tried to grab as much of the detail, because I do a lot of interviews as well in my books. About a third of each book is dedicated to interviews. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that some of the collective industrial wisdom, so to speak, isn't lost to the ether.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you did here. It's something for history, for musicians, that are always going to be listening to those songs. They're always going to be listening to those songs. So here's another reference point, and I think it's really valuable because of that.
Well, it's funny you said that, because one of the things I remember when we started editing, and Claire said to me, my editor, she says, you got to stop interviewing people. We can't put everybody in this. And she goes, we got 90 minutes, whatever we have. You can't put every interview in. You can't put 5 seconds, 10 seconds of each person to tell the story. She said, and she's right. You won't fall in love with anybody, if you don't have that character build in a film. Now it's different, obviously, with books. You could do whatever you want, but at the same time, so I said, well, that's why I said I agree with you, but I'm not going to stop interviewing everybody, or anybody. I said, because A, I don't know what's going to come up possibly in some crazy session. And B, I said, that's why God gave us DVDs. I knew at some point we would have extras. Well, I thought that until recently when I finally got signed with Magnolia. They said, well, we'll do a DVD with a few extras. I said, no, you got to do more than a few. I said, I've been working on this way too long. And I think they finally realized and did the research to realize there's a lot of content. There's a lot of people that want this. And that's what we were able to do. We have 6 hours on this DVD. I interviewed Mike Nesmith a week before I had to put the DVD in, the content.
Yeah.
And I needed his song for one of the stories about Wichita Whistle that he in one of his songs. And I said, by the way, can we use the song? But by the way, would you be interested in doing an interview? Because I'm going to be up north. And he said, yes. Now, he was a guy that turned me down many times over the years, or his people turned me down. Well, now it would changed.
Wow.
Now he was like, yeah, I'll be into it.
Very
the
cool.
people that, yeah. So what I'm saying is I'm going to continue interviewing people if they have a story. I'll figure out where to put it. It won't be on a DVD, but we'll put it on YouTube just to keep the stories alive and knowledge there.
I can't wait to see the DVD, the Blu-ray, just for that extra footage. The movie is great, and I'll certainly watch it again and again. But boy, the extra footage, I can't wait.
It's funny because it's like 6 hours. I mean, and I haven't seen a lot of it in a long time. And the other day I had to go through, scan through some of them and went, oh, this is pretty good. And when I start complimenting, our own stuff, I thought, oh, this is good. I made me feel good about it. Listen, there's stuff I would have kept on going. I could have kept on going but I ended up having to license another 15 songs.
Wow.
It's like for the DVD extras. And I'm like, my wife is going to kill me, and rightly so. I mean, because it's like, if I, let's say, license 15 more songs, am I going to sell any more DVDs or Blu-rays to cover that? Probably not. But you know what? This is it. I had to go for it and just go for it and give you your best shot. There's more I would have done. I look at those things, go, oh, God, I wish I would have done this. So we're talking about the outtakes. I'm okay with the film, but I still want to do more. So I'm not giving up yet.
Yeah. So last question. What's the best piece of business advice that you've learned through all of this?
Oh, good. That's a really good question. If you really believe, I mean, there's a point where it's like, someone said, oh, well, let me just try to put it in a better way. I never gave up because I really believed in the project. But if I had gotten bad response at the beginning, meaning like the bad reviews, then I would have had to give it up, because I would have taken my family. I was taking my family for a ride that didn't necessarily have to go down that ride with me or rode with me. But, when the doors were closed, I'd go through a window. When the window was closed, I'd go through a door. And my dad taught me one thing. He said, never blow up on a leader. Meaning, like, you could be 110% right, but, and that guy's up on the leader is totally wrong. But if you blow up on him, don't expect to come back to work tomorrow or the next, whenever it is. And if you do, great, you got lucky. And those are those times over the 19 years in making this film where I wanted to just scream at a label guy or publisher or whatever. And I didn't, because I just thought, just suck it up and just be, let's just go for it. Just seeing, sooner or later, and all of a sudden, 10 years later, they're on your side.
Yeah.
They're campaigning for you and saying, and they don't forget the hell they put you through. Some of those people, and there's only been a couple tough things on this whole film, but most of it's been joy. I got to move on though. It's like, I'm just thrilled that these guys are getting their due and they know who Hal Blaine is or who Don Randy or Joe Osborne or Carol Kay. I mean, it's amazing,
Yeah.
that they are going to be household names now.
Well, that's due to you, and I should say congratulations for pulling it off and for persevering because, hey, not many people would last for 19 years.
I know if you asked, again, let's go back to the beginning. If you said it's going to take you 19 years, you think you'd stick around? No. But, it's like, I just wanted to make sure I was not on the end of the film as a dedication. It's like, come on, I got to outlast this thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to let it take me down.
Well, very cool. Thank you for spending some time with me today. This is great.
Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate it. And I look forward to sharing. The June 16th is when it's coming out. So I look forward to sharing all these outtakes with you.
Very cool. Thanks, Denny.
See ya.
To find out more about the Wrecking Crew movie and to buy the DVD or Blu-ray, go to wreckingcrewfilm.com. That's Wrecking Crew Film, all one word, .com. I highly recommend it. It's a fabulous movie. You've heard these songs hundreds of times before, and you'll be just amazed at the backstory. It's really great. Highly recommend it. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please send them to questions@bobbioinnercircle.com. Many, many thanks to Steve Cherubino. He's the host of the EDM Producer Podcast at edmmr.com. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to bobbyowsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or you can go to bobbyowinnercircle.com, or you can find it on iTunes or Stitcher. At bobbyowsinski.com and bobbyowinnercircle.com, you'll also find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time